Okay, people, here we go. Back for video number 2. Just going to review a little bit of what we did in the first video real fast. You've got, remember, page-based routing. So anything that's in this pages folder is a route, is a page. So obviously to the slash is nothing is their index file, just like with HTML. So that's this page, right? This was the default page when you do create next app, which is how you start a basic next project, right? So there's also in our pages file, I have this about JSX. So remember we do that. If we go to /about, that's a page, right? So this is the about page. We talked about this underscore app.js. If you put whatever you put in here, it's going to show up on all your pages. And we made a layout component, wrapped the app, the stuff that's originally in the underscore app in our layout component, which has our header and our footer. Again, this is just standard React kind of thing you would do. This isn't specific to Next, but that's how we're getting this header and footer on both these pages. Okay. We made this little nav bar in the header, and we talked about using the link tag from Next. Generally use a regular old anchor tag if you're linking to something off your site, and you'd use the link tag when you're using routing in your site. We also talked about CSS a little bit. You have a global CSS file, and you have home.module.css so far, where CSS modules are used to scope your CSS. So if I put something in this footer anchor that's inside this home, it's only going to affect the footer anchor in the wherever I import this file to. So in other words, I have it in the index. I have this home, but I don't have the footer in there anymore. That's a bad example because I moved it to our footer component. The point is, it only, if you have this in more than one place, it'll only be in the file that you import this module to. Okay, again, this isn't not a CSS tutorial, so I'm not going to get too detailed with that. So what's next? We want to talk about some of the magic that's built into Next. Mainly, or firstly, there's a function that's given to us called getStaticProps. We want to use data from somewhere in our site. So we do that by using this getStaticProps. So I'm going to make a new page. Let's call it users. Okay. And this is the users page. Now, if we go here, because that's in the pages file, it's a little slow today. My computer must be getting a little laggy. I mean, I left too many things running in the background or something, who knows. Anyway, so this is the users page. Again, it's got our header and footer because that's in our app.js file. Okay, so let's say we want to put something a little more interesting in this page. We want to get some data from somewhere. We're going to do a couple things here. First, I'm going to do just some data that's going to be stored locally in here. I'm going to make a little data file, and we're going to import that data. Then we'll do another page that's getting the same data or similar data from an external API. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go here to this site, makaroo.com. You can, it basically generates fake data for you. You can say, I want 4 rows of JSON data with an ID, name, username, email. You can add more fields. You can pick what the fields are. There's a whole bunch of crazy different things that you can pick your fields to be. We're going with ID, name, username, and email, and I'm only taking 4 rows of it. So So since it's JSON, we have an array of objects, right? You can download it, but I'm just going to see if I can just copy this. Okay, we'll get out of here. We're going to make a new file. User data.js. Let me just do something here. Export const user data equals this array. Okay, so now we have some data that we can use in our new page. So here's our users page. So first of all, we're going to get this into the page. So we're going to have to bring it in here. Import user data. This is going to be not a default, so it's going to be from there it is. So let's see, just real quick, if we do a just to make sure we're actually getting this. What happens here if we look at the airplane mode? Lovely. That's bizarre. Okay, so let's find. Usually I hit F12 and it gives me. There we go. So console log user data, and here it is. So thing I like to do sometimes is just wrap this in some curly braces. That makes it basically into a object, because in ES6 and above, when you have the property and the value are the same, you can just do it as one thing. So now it's an object, user data, and here's what's in the user data, right? So user data is an array of 4 objects. Cool. So now we're going to use that with our get static props again, which is some of the sort of magic, the stuff that's built into Next.js. Of course, magic is probably a silly way of putting it. I like to say that it's part of what makes Next, is they give us some tools to use. Right. Okay. So the way this works, and you can just look this up in the docs pretty easily, but you do export an async function called get static props, and what happens is it return what you return from here you can use as props in your page component. So we're going to return an object that has value of props, which are props that we want to return is our user data, an object of user data. And again, I think that should work just like that, because I could say user data is user data because they're the same. You don't have to do that. That's what I was talking about before. So now here, back up in our component, we have access to those props, right? So we just structure user data, and now if we console, let's do this a little different. That's going to be like a conflict. So let's call this, let's just say data is the user data, and then we'll call this just data, and let's see what this data is. Data is undefined. Why is our data undefined? think about this for a minute. Async function get static props. Going to return our props data, user data. Maybe this needs to be up here. I don't think that's the answer, but I suppose it's possible. No, that's not the problem. Function data. Maybe this is one of those situations where I need to restart our it might be one of those things where you need to very few times you need to restart next. But since this is something that runs on the build time, maybe it needs to restart. By the way, yesterday in my video I was in 3001. Today it looks like whatever I had running on 3000 previously I had stopped, so we're gonna have to go to 3000 today. Don't let that confuse you if you were doing the same as I was. So it comes here. That came through. Okay, and that time it worked. So you did have to restart next. Okay, so okay, no problem. Cool. So now we have access to this data, right? Right now it's still just the user page. What? Can I change this so that this guy's down here? That's a little better. How about that? Still probably small to you guys looking on the screen, but hopefully not too bad. Oh, can I change it here for you? That's a little better. I don't think there's any way to change the size of this, but if you're having trouble reading it, it's just the same data that we had over here is showing up in the console. Okay, so now we can use this data and we can do something like that array of data, and just like you would do all over the place in React, we can map through that data. So let's give ourselves a list, and then we're gonna map through the data. Map each entry. We are going to make a li list item. Remember, we're going to give that a key so we don't get an error. Data.id, because we have an ID over here is one of our unique IDs on our data array, or objects in our data array. And what we want in here is going to be, let's go with, let's do it this way. We're going to give us some backticks, and then we'll be able to do this. Data.name, right? And then we can go like this. And what'll be next was data.username. What was our else? We had name, username, and email. So then we can go data.email. And that should do it. Let's see what happens. Undefined, undefined, undefined. Why are we all undefined? That's because I was doing entry and then I called it all data here. So let's, if we do that, maybe now. Hey, come on. Data. How about that? There we go. Okay. So just to review what we did here, we got some, in our get static props, we found some data. We sent it to our component. We destructured the data from these props, because remember what goes in here normally this will be props, but we're destructuring from the props this data. So we have this user data, which is this array of objects. Remember over here, this array of objects, right, which we got from here, userdata.js. So once we have that data array in here, we are able to just map over that array and bring us a list. Okay, so great. This is not really very real life though. We're probably not going to have just a user data file here. More likely, you're going to want to get this from something like an API, right, or database or something like that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use same concept, but we're going to get data from an API. So let's make another page. Oh, before we do that, let's add this page to our header. What is this one called? Users, right? So in our header, we're going to have another link. We're just going to Alt-Shift down arrow to copy that down. And this is going to be users. And this is going to be users from local file. There we go. So we have our home, our about, and our users from the local file. Okay, cool. And again, all these have our header and footer from our app. All right, we know that part already. Okay, so let's get rid of this header. Let's get rid of this user data. Let's get rid of all this stuff, right? Okay, so what I am going to do here, instead of retyping this whole thing, we're just going to basically copy this stuff, right? Copy. We're going to make a new page. This one's going to be let's call it API. Just call it API. What the heck? No, that could be confusing with this API folder, which we're going to talk about a little later. Users from API.jsx. Just let's try it like that. Okay. I'm going to paste this in here, except it's going to be, we don't need this anymore, right? We're going to call this component users API. Okay. It's going to be slightly different. We're going to get this data from somewhere else. Okay, so here we were using this macro. If you go to this typicode.com JSON placeholder thing, it's basically an online version of the same kind of thing. Let's see if I can that's not what I really want. The home page of this thing. Okay, also not really what I really wanted. At any rate, if we find the home page for this later, that's not important. But the bottom line is it gives you some fake data. Okay, so what we've got here is I chose the fields for our last one based on what we're going to get from this. It's basically an API for testing, right? You can get and post and delete and things like that to it. So we're going to use it here. It's going to give us 10 people this time. It has an ID, name, username, email, which is the same fields we used in our last one. This one also has an physical address and a couple other things, which we may or may not use. Okay, so bottom line is we're going to need this URL. Okay, so this time what we're going to do, instead of getting our data from our local file, we have to make an API call here, right? So we're going to say const user data. We're still going to use this user data that we're going to do here, right? Instead of getting it from up here before we had it coming from our local user data file, instead of importing it here, we're going to fetch it over here. User data equals weight, because that's Remember, we're inside this async, right? So we're going to fetch. That's why I have the await there, I should say. So fetch, and then you put the URL. Here's the URL that I copied a moment ago. All right. And then we're going to take our response and we're going to say response.json. Okay, and then that should be our user data now should be this array of objects. Okay. Which again, so it should be the same thing we had before. We'll check this console log to see if it worked. So instead of getting this user data array from our local, now we're getting this user data array from this URL, this API. Again, we're sending it to props, calling it data is equal to this user data, and we're sending it here through the props. Then we're using it over here. Let's see what happens. Hit save. And what did we call this one? Users dash API. Dash API. What do we get? What do we get? Success or fail? Success or fail? Reference users is not defined. Let's see. In users API, users is not defined. Where is that? 26. Because I called this users API, but I never changed it down here. Let's see what happens now. Do we get it? We get it. And it was the new data. All right. This is the data that is coming from this API. Leanne Graham, Irvin Howell. Leanne Graham, Irvin Howell. Okay, so now we're getting data from a different place and using it in our site. Cool. Good stuff. All right, that's another good little chunk. I think we'll have a good place to stop there again. And we'll get more into get static props and into how to generate pages based on information. Instead of just putting data into a single page, what we're gonna do next time is take each one of these, we're gonna make them into a link that will go to a page for the individual user, and that's where we will end up using the rest of this information from. We'll use their address and their phone and things like that on their individual page. So each one of these will be a link to their own individual page. Before I go, let's just add this to our nav. Again, the shortcut here is Shift Alt down arrow, copies this thing down, and what is it called? Users dash API. Users from API. And that should come up here. So here's the one from our local file, and here's the one from our API. Cool, we're rocking and rolling. I think we're doing okay. More next time. Hope this helps. Practice a little bit every day. Okay, go review this. Make sure you understand what's going on. Don't just type what I'm typing. Make sure you understand what each little function is. Okay? We'll see you next time.